Victor 636, definite pilot deviation. Advise you contact Philadelphia approach on...
I've been making these videos for a while, and I've been flying for a while as well. And I've heard possible pilot deviation many times while I'm out flying and on making these videos. However, I have never, until this video, heard definite pilot deviation. And it's a little bit strange, but you're going to understand why this controller said it. But first I need to explain this. There are three basic categories a pilot will fall into. Student pilot. Essentially what that means is that the pilot is probably under 200 hours of total flight experience and they can't be paid to fly. Commercial pilot. This allows you to get paid to fly, but typically you're going to be flying much smaller aircraft. And then ATP, or Airline Transport Pilot. This is essentially the top rating that you're going to get, and that allows you to fly all the bigger planes. Now this call sign, ExecJet, as far as I understand, is NetJets. NetJets, when I was doing corporate back in the day, was one of the hardest to get into and hardest to qualify for. They are some of the better paid pilots from what I remember, but I've been out of the corporate game for a while. But ExecJet, NetJets, that's just a correlation there. It's not like, at least it wasn't, where anybody could just walk in and get in the door. So they have some minimum standards they expect you to meet. And as far as I know, the minimum is at least to be an ATP, an Airline Transport Pilot. So they should be able to handle things like going into a really busy airport. But here's what happens.
Victor 636, you're 8 miles from Strat at 3000, clear on F24. 3000, clear on F24, Victor 636. Just 636, is everything okay? Sure. Okay, because I gave you Strat at 3000. Strat is 5 miles behind you and you're still at 4000. Victor 636, we're going to 3000 now. We had to have about 3000 for Strat towards the approach.
Alright, these pilots are going into Teterboro, and in my personal humble opinion, that airspace right there is some of the busiest airspace in the world. Now, on the ground, you probably aren't going to find faster moving ground traffic than Chicago, but airspace-wise, and I'm talking worldwide, airspace-wise, this is some of the most congested, fastest speaking controllers that I've ever seen. You really have to bring your A game when you go into this airport, and any pilot that's going in there should know that ahead of time. Because in this very small space, you have these major airports, JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark, which are handling most of the commercial traffic that's going into the area. But then right here, you have Teterboro, handling a lot of the private jets that are also coming in. So the controllers have to juggle a lot. So I always brief people when they're going in there with me, hey, I ask them, have you been here before? No, I haven't. Well, not Teterboro, I'm going into Newark, for example. Have you been here before? No, I haven't. Okay, things are gonna happen really, really fast. So just be prepared for the speed that this is going to occur. I give them a heads up before we go in there because it happens really fast. But the controllers in this area, they think, okay, you're an airline transport pilot. You want to do big boy and big girl things here in our sandbox. You better be ready for it. They have an expectation that you're going to be on top of your game when you come in here. And part of being on top of your game is reading full readback clearances. Like here, he forgot to read crossing Strat at 3000. Listen.
Victor 636, you're 8 miles from Strat at 3000, clear on F24. 3000 on F24, Victor 636.
The thing is when you go into some of these busier airports like this and you're working in this type of airspace, the controllers give you a little bit of leeway because they expect that, hey, this person's an ATP, they're flying a commercial aircraft, they're going to be doing the things that they know that we need to do. There's a certain level of comfort that they have with us. Now, if this was, let's say, a new student pilot, and they said something like that, like they didn't say Strat at 3000, and they just read their call sign, they'd be like, no, confirm Strat at 3000 and the rest of it. They would be more on you like that. Sometimes it gets a little bit lax when you're getting into some of these busier airports where things are really busy like this. They just expect, okay, this person's going to do this thing, obviously. This is the approach they're doing. It's into runway 24 into Teterboro. As you can see, Strat doesn't have an actual hard crossing altitude like you'll see on some arrivals. But essentially, they're going to follow this path, and that will get them lined up for the runway and keep them out of any of the bad airspace. Now, personally, I think it was pretty clear when he said cross Strat at 3. That seemed pretty clear to me what was being instructed. The pilot didn't read it back, and so now you're going to see how this all starts to break down.
Say again? The 636, we heard at or above 3,000, clear for departure, Strat. Okay, just at least when you get to Wheezy, make sure you're at 2 there, alright? We'll get to Wheezy 2, is at 636. Thanks.
New York approach, that's at 633, 4,000, Lima.
633, good morning, altimeter 2975. This is 636. Well, I thought we agreed that you were going to cross Wheezy at 2, so this is the second clearance that you're not abiding.
This is 636, Roger.
No, the Roger isn't the answer. I want to know why you're not complying with the clearances that I'm giving you.
Okay, so he gave him a pass, basically saying like, all right, cool, you missed that one at 3, no big deal. I think he was going to let him slide on that one. But it was very clear, and this pilot read back, cross Wheezy at 2. There's no doubt about what he had said.
So when you get to Wheezy, make sure you're at 2 there, all right?
And I know you might be thinking, well, Kelsey, maybe he didn't have time to get down. So here's the plate here. The controller said earlier that he was 5 miles past Strad.
Strad is 5 miles behind you, and you're still at 4,000.
So that puts him roughly here at Scooby, and he was at 4,000 feet. So at this point, he should be racing to get down to 3,000 feet, but he is 10 miles away from Wheezy. So let's be generous and say this guy is coming in at 180 knots. My guess is that he's probably going a little bit slower than that, but let's just guess that he's coming in at 180 knots. That would give him about 3 minutes in order to get down with losing 2,000 feet. That's not a lot. That 2,000 feet in 3 minutes is easy. To give you some perspective, when you're coming into land, which is usually the calmest, shallowest descent that you're going to be at, the descent rate here is going to be 900 to 1,000 feet a minute. Now, if he had aggressively got after that, he could have easily crossed there at 2,000. Now, he didn't either set up the box correctly or he didn't do something correct. Something to know is that as a pilot, if the controllers give you something you can't do, which has happened to me, I've been upheld at, let's say, a speed restriction. They'll say 240 knots. You're at 240 knots and they want you to lose like 15,000 feet in this really short distance. Don't go fast, but you got to lose all this altitude that you have to lose for some crossing restrictions. If they give that to you, and I look in the computer and I go, there's no way that that's going to happen, you can always, as a pilot, read back and say, unable Wheezy at 2. That wouldn't be applicable here because it seems like impossible that you couldn't lose 2,000 feet or less in 3 minutes. But I'm just saying, this pilot had that option to always say unable to do that. So now the controller can make other arrangements. You can't just not do it and then get to that thing and be like, yeah, cool, didn't quite make it. No, you have to have the communication with the controller so they know what's going on, so they can make other arrangements to handle whatever it is that they need to handle, whatever person that's taking off or whatever airspace or whatever magical stuff that's happening over there in the ATC control room, that they're able to make arrangements for that. So you have to tell them. Also, I left in this clip here of the other ExecJet 633, checking in for a reason.
New York approach, ExecJet 633, 4,000, Lima.
Because that does add to the confusion. When I'm flying, there are a lot of different call signs that I fly at my airline because of the diverse type of flying that I do. And with those different call signs, if you hear someone with a similar call sign to you, sometimes the controller will say, let's just, for example, say it's Boeing. And they go, hey, Boeing 123, similar call sign, Boeing 234 on frequency. So they'll sometimes say that. The controller didn't say that here. But even if they don't say that, when I hear that other Boeing 234 check-in, I go, oh, I really need to pay attention here. Because that means that I might take the instructions given to my buddies in the other plane and I might do them myself. So I go extra alert when I hear my call sign and something similar of a tail number to mine, which is what these pilots should have done. The controllers telling you that there's a similar call sign and frequency is really just a courtesy. You as a pilot have to be responsible for what's going on. So this aircraft messed up their last 2 crossing restrictions. They messed up crossing this one at 3, they messed up crossing this one at 2, and now he has a similar company call sign on the frequency. So at this point, if I were this pilot, I'd be paying 100% extra attention to what's going on because I've already irritated this controller. I can tell that they're irritated, and now I have this other plane that's on frequency. So I got to be paying extra attention to what's going on. It doesn't get better. Check this out.
That's a lot. Want to know the reason why you're not complying with the clearances that I gave you? Are you separating yourself from other IFR traffic? Would you like to continue VFR, or, I mean, I'm just confused why I keep asking you to do stuff and you're not doing what I'm telling you.
So we're sending to 2000, they're wheezy and was sensitive, sorry.
Right it back.
Sure.
562, turn right heading 080. Flexjet 562. For one aircraft.
Now, this is just my own personal opinion, but the on-air reprimanding is not helping anybody. This pilot is clearly behind the aircraft or overloaded with something, or something's going on that is preventing him from safely doing the things that he's getting instructions to do from this controller. But the on-air naughty isn't going to help anything, and it's only just going to jam up the airway. So I've heard controllers do this sometimes, and that's not really their place, in my opinion. That's not their place to start doing on-air reprimands. I think it's really unprofessional, if you want my honest opinion on it. Now, I normally trim out a lot of the other radio calls just to make this story coherent, but you notice that I left this call in from FlexJet.
562, turn right heading 080.
And you probably noticed that after FlexJet replied, they were getting stepped on, meaning two different people were talking at the same time, and this is what that sounded like.
Flexjet 562.
And that is why the controller came back and said this.
For one aircraft.
You want to guess who it was that was stepping on FlexJet when they were replying? I'll give you one guess, but before I do, let me show you this. Looking at this approach plate, he's already past Wheezy, so he's probably in this point right here, about to turn to a heading of 223 and heading right towards the airport. So a heading of 080 would take him off of this and basically going the opposite direction, which would also put him into all the airspace of the LaGuardia traffic that's going in. So it would make no sense at all for them to be turning that direction. But the problem is when you get rattled, and this controller is not helping that situation at all, but when you get rattled and overloaded, you start to have your brain not function very well. And when your brain's not functioning very well, you start doing things that under normal circumstances you would never do. And that is what is happening here. Watch this.
Heading again for digit 680, 636.
Said 633, sincere current heading, maintain 3000.
636, we're going left turn to 080, correct?
Ooh, no, you're on the approach. 636, you're supposed to be at 2000, you're cleared the approach, you're already not doing anything that I told you to do, and you're not descending. Like, I'm just confused. Do you want to continue going to Teterboro? What would you like to do?
Descending now for Teterboro, digit 636, sorry.
636, let me know when you're ready to copy a phone number.
Copy digit 636.
636, definite pilot deviation. Advise you contact Philadelphia approach on 215-492.
Thanks.
See you back.
492.
636, call Teterboro Tower 109.5.
Yeah.
Now, first thing, I would hope that if I was this pilot, that I would have done it a little bit differently here. When that controller calls and says, hey, I have a phone number for you to copy, I would have said like, no, I'll get it from you on the ground, is what I hope I would say, because this is one of the highest, most intense workload times for a pilot. Takeoff and landing. That's what we're all there for. And during that time, you need to be focused 100% on what it is that you're doing. What you shouldn't be focused on is writing down phone numbers, not from anybody, not from flight attendants, not from air traffic control. I think the controller is actually out of line here for this pilot who's barely able to hold on to what's going on, is not following the radio calls very well, isn't hitting the crossing restrictions, to now dump this like, I got a phone number for you. No, you should have called over to Teterboro Tower and said, hey, once this plane gets on the ground and off of the runway and away from everybody, then give him this phone number to call us. That would have been the right thing to do, because this guy's already behind and now he's taking out a pen, writing down a phone number when he should be focused on landing the aircraft. So I think this was really a huge mistake on the fact of the controller making this pilot do it at this particular time. Now, up in cruise or other times of the flight, okay, cool, no big deal, but not right as you're getting ready to land when you're already having a hard time managing the workload. I think that's dumb. The thing that's interesting is this controller initially started off with a lot of care and concern when he says this.
636, everything okay?
Which I really liked, because he was saying like, hey, you missed that, is everything okay? Which gives the pilot kind of a chance to say like, hey, I'm up here by myself, or my FO is distracted, or whatever it is, to say, hey, I'm a little bit behind on the aircraft, or whatever the situation is. He doesn't say any of that stuff, but initially the controller gave him some care and concern, which is what, when you as a pilot are messing up, the controller should be doing. It's a team, not a parent-child relationship. So this was initially, I thought, okay, great. Then he kept making mistakes, and I understand the irritation from the controller, because I would feel the exact same way. Like, dude, now you're playing here in our sandbox, and clearly you should be out somewhere where there's no other planes around and things are moving a lot slower. I understand the irritation, however, not professional. And he starts being really rude to him here.
No, the Roger isn't the answer. I want to know why you're not complying with the clearances that I'm giving you.
This pilot clearly needs to have a chat with air traffic control and probably the FAA about how this all happened. So I understand the controller wanted to talk to that pilot. 100% agree with that pilot getting a phone number to copy. However, the on-air reprimand doesn't make any sense, and the phone number as they're getting ready to land, also a terrible timing. Getting that phone number once you land, get them off the runway, fine. Hey, let the ground controller say, hey, possible pilot deviation, here's a phone number, Pennsylvania or whatever, Philly wants to talk to you. So that would have been the right time to do that. Loading him up here, no. Because he did miss the altitude at Strad, he missed the altitude at Wheezy, and he took someone else's call, which would have him doing a full 180-degree turn going into very bad airspace for him. The pilot knew once he missed that second one that he was probably in trouble. This controller's voice let him know, hey, this is not what we signed up for. However, giving him that phone number is going to rattle him even more at a stage where the pilot needs to be focused on just safely landing the aircraft. So it was really poor judgment on his part. The pilot made a lot of mistakes, a lot. What I would consider from a pilot of this level of experience, hard to justify. Like, okay, the first one you missed, okay. You know, if I make a mistake, which believe me, has happened plenty of times, I'm now extra alert of everything else that's going on. So he missed the second one, and then he missed the radio call, and that is clogging up the airways in really busy airspace. So clearly the pilot knows, hey, I really messed this thing up. And I don't think if the FAA was talking to him about this that he'd be like, no, I didn't make any mistakes. I think he knows that he made the mistakes. This controller, I think, is making worse errors in the sense of he's jamming up the airways, he's berating him in a way that's going to make him more uncomfortable with what's going on and is really less professional. This pilot is trying to do the right thing, but lacks the ability or something to successfully get it done. The controller is actually making an effort to make things worse as this video gets later and later, in my opinion. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.